As our wedding day approached, my fiancé's first love returned to the country. They were childhood sweethearts, the kind of pair that had grown up inseparable since they were toddlers. On the day of the wedding, under the watchful gaze of every guest, Marcus appeared. Clad in a sharp suit, he lunged forward and grabbed Elena's hand. Deciding to play the bigger man and grant them their fairy tale ending, I stepped up, took the microphone from the MC, and began enthusiastically offering them my blessings. However, just as Marcus was about to whisk the bride away, the unexpected happened. Elena swung her hand and delivered a slap so fierce it nearly dislocated Marcus's jaw. With eyes rimmed red with emotion, she turned to confront me. "Ryan, who exactly do you think you're handing me over to?" I had rarely seen Elena look so vulnerable. She was panicking, reaching out to grab me with a desperate clumsiness. Her perfectly manicured nails dug deep into the back of my hand. Meanwhile, Marcus was still in shock. He clutched his swollen, reddened cheek, staring at Elena in disbelief. "Elena, you hit me?" For him, Elena ignored him completely. I looked at Marcus first, offering a sheepish, awkward smile. "Sorry about that, buddy. Elena's been a bit temperamental lately. If you wanted to object to the wedding, you should have been a bit faster. Why wait until she's already spent 3 months painstakingly planning every detail of this day?" Elena's voice rang out, her tone eerily calm. "Ryan, look at me. Do you really not want to marry me?" Having been with Elena for 6 years, I knew exactly how furious she was beneath that calm exterior. I didn't dare meet her eyes, simply smiling as I replied, "Isn't this what you wanted?" Marcus looked pathetic. One side of his face was bleeding from Elena's slap, a truly wretched sight. I couldn't help but think that he really didn't deserve to stand next to Elena, who looked like a goddess today. Suddenly, Elena's tone softened. She asked, "So, that plot of land in the North District and the monthly dividends you were promised, you don't want those anymore either?" I whipped my head around instantly, looking at her with newfound enthusiasm. Nobody turns down that kind of money. The suffering male lead role clearly didn't suit me. To trace the origin of all this, I have to go back to the first time I met Elena. The heiress of the Elena family had always been a legend at our university, while I was just a nameless face in the crowd. We met at the graduation ball. That night, Elena wore a crimson evening gown, her long hair swept up elegantly behind her head. Just by standing there, she commanded the gaze of everyone in the room. My mischievous friends stared in awe, but when it came time to find a dance partner, they laughingly shoved me forward. "What a pity," one whispered. "Senior Marcus didn't show up." I stumbled halfway across the floor and froze. I had heard the name Marcus countless times, always followed by accolades. Piano prodigy, world-renowned talent, a star from a young age. People whispered that I shared a striking resemblance to him, Elena's white moonlight, who had moved abroad. Perhaps the likeness was undeniable. Elena spotted me in the crowd instantly and began to walk toward me with slow, deliberate grace. She carried the faint scent of wine. Her slender fingers brushed against my face, leaving me dazed. She whispered, "I found you." Every young man in his school years has dreamed of being chosen by such a magnificent woman, of living a life of effortless luxury. I didn't ask who she was looking for, and she never mentioned who I resembled. We naturally exchanged contact information. Elena was 2 years my senior, a sophisticated, brilliant woman. She often spoke of the struggles of building her empire, which always drew my empathy. Her unique insights into business were mesmerizing. We talked about everything. I loved sharing the small, interesting details of my life with her. I loved listening to her laugh or sigh, followed by her careful, thoughtful advice. She was just like me. She loved spicy food, playing badminton, and dreaming of traveling the world. Once, unable to ask her directly, I brought it up over the phone. "I heard people say I look like your childhood sweetheart. As the person involved, what do you think?" "You don't look like anyone else," she replied. At that time, I was young and full of passion. It was easy to fall for a woman who seemed to be my kindred spirit. 6 years of peaceful companionship made me complacent. I had almost forgotten that I was merely a stand-in for the white moonlight in her heart. My decision to step aside wasn't a sudden impulse. It had been brewing for 3 months, ever since Marcus returned to the country. It was at that same time that Elena suddenly announced she wanted to marry me. Our business had just passed a major growth phase. Elena often said, "Once we're through this busy season, I'll take you to France, the place you've dreamed of since school." It wasn't the first time she had made such a promise. But when I saw a photo on a colleague's social media feed, Elena laughing with a man beneath the Eiffel Tower in Paris, my heart went strangely numb. Only half of the man's face was visible, but I knew exactly who he was. Marcus. The man I had never met, yet whose shadow I had lived in for years. At 11 p.m. that night, Elena returned from her business trip, wheeling her suitcase behind her. She hurried into the bathroom, trying to keep her movements quiet so as not to wake me. Her phone on the nightstand vibrated incessantly. I stirred, intending to silence it for her, but my eyes caught the notification. It was Marcus. "Elena, I'm returning home in a few days. Can you meet me?" I said nothing. A flurry of photos followed, quickly pushing his text down the screen. Elena had changed her passcode. I couldn't open the phone even if I wanted to. She stepped out of the bathroom, still draped in a light mist of steam, only to find me sitting against the headboard, staring blankly at the box of pastries she had brought back. I didn't like sweets, and neither did she. It wasn't hard to guess who they were meant for. I gestured to the device beside her. "Marcus messaged you." Elena froze for a fraction of a second before picking up the phone. She tapped out a reply in seconds, then nonchalantly wiped the screen clean. "You didn't read it?" "I didn't need to," I replied dismissively. "A man who hesitates like that, it's embarrassing." Elena looked at me, her eyes curving slightly. I had always loved her eyes, large, bright, and soulful. When she looked at me, it felt as though I were the only thing in her universe. She paused for a few beats before speaking. "Ryan, how about we have a fixed-term marriage? A contract marriage to make him jealous, so he'll run back to you? Am I just a pawn in your game?" I wanted to laugh, but before I could get the words out, Elena mentioned the North District land and the monthly shares. That plot of land was useless to her, but for me, it was the golden bridge of profit between two major regions. Elena knew I needed that project. Mutually beneficial. Our fragile relationship was, once again, maintained by sheer force of will and a heavy dose of pragmatism. Seeing my sudden spark of enthusiasm, Elena added, "After the wedding, we won't interfere with each other's freedom." I nodded vigorously. Compared to making money, feelings were worth nothing. If I ever met Elena in a professional setting again, I'd probably shout, "Madam Chairman is too generous." As if reading my thoughts, she let out a helpless laugh. "Forget, Chairman. Just husband is enough." Ultimately, we were just a commercial union, a merger of interests. Now that the rightful owner of her heart had returned, it was time for me to step aside. However, one must maintain the basic spirit of a contract, especially when the investor had emphasized it so many times. Back at the altar, the guests were in an uproar. Marcus stood there, looking nothing like the top-tier prodigy he was supposed to be. He looked almost comical. I shoved the MC's script into his hands. "Help me host this wedding for a bit." Elena's eyes darkened. She looked at Marcus's flushed, humiliated face with cold indifference. "Don't you understand the law?" she said slowly. "Don't you know that crashing someone else's wedding to steal the bride is an interference with the freedom of marriage? And is that behavior illegal?" I silently added, "Seriously, man, if you were going to steal a bride, you should have done it quietly." Elena shot me a glaring look, her eyes filled with a mix of fury and disappointment, as if she were frustrated by my utter lack of backbone. The Elena and Marcus families were both titans in Dark City. By noon, the stunt Marcus pulled that morning had been seasoned with gossip and spread to every corner of the city. Lingering feelings, a dramatic wedding heist. High society romance was truly a messy affair. The wedding dragged on late into the evening. Once the guests had mostly cleared out, I pulled out my phone to call a driver, scrolling through the nonstop notifications on social media. Even the Marcus family's PR department couldn't stop the story from spiraling. Marcus was rapidly being cast as the devoted second male lead, whose love went unrequited. Meanwhile, my own follower count unexpectedly surged by tens of thousands. The internet was ruthless. Gentle male god? What a joke. He's a homewrecker. His acting is as cheap as his soul. Why isn't Elena speaking up? What a femme fatale. Her childhood sweetheart stayed loyal for her, and she goes and gets married first. I hauled the drunken Elena onto my shoulder. The more I read, the more helpless I felt. Finally, I typed out a reply on her behalf. "I'm just a stand-in. If you're going to scold her, leave me out of it. Thanks." Elena leaned against my shoulder, her glazed eyes searching mine with a complex expression. "Do you really feel nothing for me?" She had been drinking all night, and finally, she hit her limit. Doubled over against me, she began to retch uncontrollably. It wasn't that I felt nothing. I sighed, gently wiping the corners of her mouth. During the early years of our startup, I hadn't taken care of myself. Constant drinking and late nights had left me with chronic stomach issues. Elena never allowed me to touch alcohol. She cared deeply about my health, yet in other ways, she was remarkably heartless. In the car, for once, I didn't engage in our usual banter. She was drifting in a drunken fog, staring at me as if I were the one who had betrayed her. Ahem, that thing on the internet? I'll handle it, I stammered. Good. Save some money, she mumbled. Save what? The PR fees? Don't worry, I've got it. I turned to look at her, but Elena had already succumbed to the alcohol, slipping into a restless sleep. The road ahead stretched endlessly into the darkness, the driver's dashboard lights casting a faint, flickering glow. Inside the car, the heater hummed with a warmth that couldn't quite soothe the sudden, bitter ache rising in my chest. I wasn't a man prone to melancholy or sentimentality. But then again, if a person could discard years of emotions so easily, they wouldn't be human. The car pulled up to the house Elena and I had bought together. We shared ownership, but every piece of furniture, every tiny corner of that home, had been handpicked by her. Perhaps it was because our tastes were so similar. Or perhaps it was because she and Marcus shared the same aesthetic. Before stepping out of the car, I added Marcus on WeChat and began scrolling through his feed. I found you. That was his latest post. Who did he find? What did he find? I sat down beside the sleeping Elena and picked up her phone. Her new passcode was our wedding date, which also happened to be Marcus's birthday. I thought to myself that he really should have stolen the bride sooner. If he had, he wouldn't be stuck watching me lead Elena home with red-rimmed eyes, mourning the simultaneous failure of his love life and his reputation. Her phone vibrated incessantly. As her newly minted husband, I gave a symbolic nod to the unconscious Elena. I'm opening your phone, okay? The screen flickered to life. A barrage of messages from Marcus flooded in. Elena, have you truly made your decision? He's just a stand-in. Why him and not me? It's my first birthday back in the country. Are you really not going to spend it with me? I know you aren't actually drunk. I looked at Elena, fast asleep, and then back at the screen where the typing status appeared and disappeared repeatedly. It was irritating to see a grown man be this clingy. I scrolled up to read the earlier parts of their conversation. Elena, I'm coming home in a few days. Can you meet me? I know you're getting married, but can't you wait a little longer? Wait for me. Elena's reply had been a blunt, heartless no. Truly cold-blooded. I took a deep breath and reached a final conclusion. Elena was a Poseidon, a master of juggling multiple hearts at once. What are you whispering about? Elena sat up, half awake, her eyes glazed with a drunken haze. My hand holding the phone trembled slightly as the scent of wine drifted toward me, followed by the sudden warmth of her body pressing against my back. She gently stroked my fingers, her brow furrowing in a frown. Where's your ring? I panicked, setting the phone down to reach for the wedding band. But Elena hugged me so tightly that I lost my balance. As I lunged for it, my fingertips only succeeded in flicking the ring deeper into the shadows beneath the TV stand. It vanished without a trace. Beside my ear, she let out a soft, heavy sigh. Don't you like this ring? Elena's voice was soft, carrying a strange, fragile hint of grievance. We can pick out a new pair tomorrow then. She wasn't the type of woman who knew how to act cute or clingy. I was certain the alcohol had completely muddled her brain. I'm not Marcus, I said, pausing for a moment before adding firmly, and I'm not any other man either. When drunk, Elena became far more animated and blunt. She looked at me with sudden, startling intensity. I know you aren't. You are my husband and the father of my child. Child? What child? I froze, the word echoing in my head with a sense of mounting confusion. A bizarre, dark thought flashed through my mind. Had I been cuckolded to such an extreme? I turned to look at her, but Elena just shook her head, a smile of innocent mischief playing on her lips. Not yet. I'm just telling you now, so you'll be surprised later. Well, it was certainly a big surprise. Elena snuggled into my arms, her light, rhythmic breathing tickling my ear. I sat there, stiff as a board, while she remained blissfully unaware, sleeping soundly as if the world were perfectly at peace. In the middle of the night, Elena's phone rang incessantly, shattering my shallow sleep. In my groggy state, I heard Marcus's voice on the other end, choked with sobs, as if he were mid-breakdown. His words were fragmented, his weeping so pathetic it was grating to the ears. Elena reached out, squeezed my hand gently, and then slipped out of the bedroom. By 3:30 a.m., I was still lying in the exact same position. The spot beside me on the mattress had gone cold, the warmth of her body long vanished. Elena hadn't come back. At 4 a.m., I saw a new post on Marcus's social media. It was a photo of a hand wearing a ring, captioned, "Those who hear not the music think those who dance are mad." The ring in the photo was the very one I had personally placed on Elena's finger. Through the reflection in the glass coffee table in the shot, I could see half of her face. Even though it was blurred, I could tell she looked happy. It was Marcus's 25th birthday. If it hadn't been for the events of the past, they probably would have been married long ago. I sat in the dark, thinking, 6 years of companionship isn't something one can just discard overnight. But if Elena didn't value what we had, I couldn't allow myself to drown in it either. Elena didn't return for the rest of the night. I was exhausted to the point of madness, sitting with my eyes wide open, waiting through the long, lonely stretch of dawn. When she finally walked through the door, she was wearing a fresh outfit, looking sharp and composed. I remained on the sofa, facing her. "You're back," I said flatly. She nodded, walking toward me with a smile on her face. "Did you miss me?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for a plate of takeout on the table that had gone stone cold. She was on her period, and I had my chronic stomach issues. We were a fine pair of wrecks. Elena stared at me, her gaze as sharp as a needle pricking at my heart. I gritted my teeth and set my chopsticks down. I couldn't bring myself to play the game of hurting myself just to spite someone else. "Stop beating around the bush," she said bluntly. "If you have something to say, say it. Were you out celebrating Marcus's birthday?" Elena visibly stiffened for a split second. She handed me a glass of warm water she had just poured, then poured half a glass for herself before speaking slowly. "It's not like that. I went to find someone. She needed help."
Right.
Finding someone who just happens to be 185 centimeters tall, exactly 3 centimeters shorter than me, I thought bitterly. Elena blinked at me, looking genuinely confused. I sighed inwardly. A true queen of hearts, she probably can't even keep track of who she's seeing. Elena seemed about to explain further, but stopped herself. I pressed on. "I went to your office last week. Where's that guy in the white shirt?" Elena's expression turned frosty. Because of her menstrual cramps, she needed to take traditional herbal medicine to regulate her body. I had gone there that day to drop off her prescription, only to catch her and a simple-looking college student getting into her car. It was the car I had given her as a wedding gift. There was no mistaking it. 20 minutes later, the boy had stepped out, red-faced going in, ghostly pale coming out. Elena's voice took on a deadly serious tone. "You are my husband. There is no one else." "What?" I looked down at the cup of ginger tea she nudged toward me. "You don't even remember that I can't stand ginger?" Elena pushed the tea closer. "It's good for your stomach. Drink it." I looked into her smiling eyes and downed 3 large cups in a row. The next morning, waking up with the lingering burn of ginger in my mouth, I decided it was time to give Elena a surprise of my own, and it had nothing to do with the tea. When Elena's mother presented me with a $5 million check and demanded I leave her daughter, I felt like I was dreaming. Finally, the rich-in-law trope had come for me. "Leave now, while the marriage registration isn't finalized," she warned. "Be careful." I wanted to tell her that my love for her daughter was unshakable, at least as long as our vows held weight. "Is that too little?" she snapped. "Fine, 5 million more." She slammed a second card onto the table, then suddenly snatched it back with an irritated huff, looking at me with a weary sigh. I sighed right back, mourning the lost 5 million. "Listen, kid," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm telling you the truth. You need to get out of town and hide for a while. Marcus has a bad reputation that's starting to leak out. I'm afraid you'll get caught in the crossfire," she warned. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't some naive male lead from a romance novel, but then I glanced out the window and saw someone practically brandishing a whip, driving a car toward us at breakneck speed. "All right, ma'am. I hear you loud and clear. I'm leaving." True to my word, I took that 5 million, booked a flight, packed my bags in the dead of night, and headed straight for Paris. Today was supposed to be the day Elena gave me her explanation. She had left for work early to chair several major meetings. I spent the morning sticking cute little sticky notes all over the house, my handwriting sprawling and artistic, though admittedly hard to decipher. When Elena finally got home, her first text to me was, "Your handwriting looks like a dog chewed on it. I can't read a word." I could only sigh. The woman clearly had no appreciation for calligraphy. "Where are you?" she texted next. I replied, "If the world were a group chat, I'd be leaving the group to go to Paris." Then, not knowing what else to say, I made something up. "Elena, I have cancer." When she video called me, I was sprawled on a beach, sipping fruit juice and soaking up the sun. On Elena's end, the screen flickered as the light shifted. She was driving, occasionally glancing down at me. "You're drinking cold drinks again," she noted. "It's fine," I said, pushing a glass of iced juice out of the frame. "What kind of cancer? Stomach? Or something else?" she guessed. Her expression gradually turned deadly serious, her voice trembling as she asked, "How long do you have left?" "I told you not to read so many romance novels." Elena arrived much faster than I expected. Just as the clock struck midnight, she was knocking on my hotel door. The cold moonlight bathed her figure. She offered a weary smile and pulled a thermos from her coat. "Don't leave me," she whispered. "Your stomach is weak. I'll cook white porridge for you." At that moment, I genuinely wondered if she had been possessed by another soul. She looked frantic, still wearing the same business suit she had on that morning. I went to pour her some water. Elena stood by the door, her eyes burning as she watched me. "Do you want to ask me something?" I asked, feigning nonchalance while holding the glass. She stared at me for a long time. You really don't have cancer? That isn't going to change." I pulled up my medical checkup reports from the last 6 months on my phone. She swiped through every page, reading them more intensely than she had ever read my graduation thesis. I looked at the crown of her head, my heart sinking slightly. She was worried I'd drop dead, and the company's shares would fall into the wrong hands. That can't happen, I thought. Even if I die, I need a proper headstone. And make sure to engrave my height on the side, so no one accidentally steps on my feet. I wasn't trying to brag, but I really am 188 centimeters tall. Elena held the phone, her hands shaking slightly. She handed my phone back. "I suppose it was only a matter of time," she said softly. "Do you want to go to the Eiffel Tower tomorrow?" I traced the rim of my glass, kept my head down, and nodded. All right. The blunt knife hanging over my head had failed to drop. I used to think we would talk of love in these unfamiliar streets. Now, I thought we only had these quiet days left to speak of tomorrow. How many tomorrows did we really have left? Elena never allowed anyone to wallow in gloom. For the next few days, she truly turned off her notifications and joined me in a series of meaningless activities. She was ruthless and decisive in business, but she had never turned that blade toward me. In our daily life, she was remarkably gentle. If it hadn't been for Marcus's sudden return, I think I would have been perfectly happy to live out my life by her side. Walking under the moonlight, we held each other in front of the Eiffel Tower. The strains of a distant melody drifted through the air, sweet and lingering. I reached out gently to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear. I want to kiss her, I thought. Elena saw right through me. A faint, knowing smile played on her lips. Does my husband really need to give me fair warning before he does that? Her breath fanned against my skin, sending a tremor through me. I pulled her close and lost myself in a long, deep kiss. When we finally broke apart, she looked up at me with a dazed expression, her crimson lips curved into a smile. Entranced by the sight, I leaned down to continue, but I felt a small, gentle nudge against my leg. I startled back to reality, finding myself staring into the eyes of a little blonde girl. Big brother, buy a rose for the lady? Elena looked slightly annoyed as she turned toward the girl. The child let out a small gasp of recognition. Wait, you're the lady who was here last time. You have a new big brother with you today. The romantic atmosphere vanished instantly. I stood there, stunned, my mind racing to process the words. I didn't understand. The girl pulled a photo from her jacket and held it up, comparing it to my face, looking back and forth repeatedly. Then, without a word, she turned and sprinted away. The kid has face blindness, I thought bitterly. But she's certainly a great assistant for catching a cheater. Elena and I looked at each other in silence. Suddenly, she spoke. Do you want to know why I was in Paris 3 months ago? I didn't dare meet her eyes, missing the clarity in her gaze. I knew a conversation was coming, perhaps on a mundane afternoon or over dinner tonight. I just didn't know how to begin. Elena was truly a creature of extremes, decisive, cold, yet hauntingly beautiful. I hadn't even had time to fully sink into this beautiful dream before the cracks began to show. Everything shattered into an illusion, dissolving into nothingness. A funeral march for our breakup played in my head, beating like 3 solemn drums. I looked up at the sky, silently calculating how long the remaining 5 million could sustain my spiral into negativity. The city lights began to flicker to life. I squinted at the people around me. Some were in love, some were staring at the sea, and some were probably digging a tunnel just to find a way back home. A set of small footsteps approached. That little girl had changed her outfit and put on sunglasses. She held a bouquet of ornamental chili peppers, waving her hand as she stood before me. Does she really think I'm an idiot? Changing clothes to pull another scam? Big brother, this is a bouquet from the lady next to you, she chirped. Happy wedding. Elena took the bouquet and handed it to me. These were grown back home. They're your favorite. My eyes stung. I let out a sharp sneeze and pushed the bouquet away. Under the city lights, Elena's face was as radiant and beautiful as the day we met. She smiled and said, I made my decision 3 months ago. Ryan, happy wedding. Can we go home and talk? I nodded dazed. The moon was bright, the stars sparse. I looked down at the ground where our shadows intersected, forming a single silhouette that was impossible to tell apart. An unspeakable joy rose in my chest. This dreamlike haze lasted until we entered the house, dissolving back into the mundane world. Elena closed the door carefully and leisurely changed into her slippers. The soft rhythmic thud of her footsteps finally stopped right beside me. I sat on the sofa, clutching the chili pepper bouquet, looking at her with watery eyes. Elena set the bouquet aside. She leaned in, staring at me intensely. I knew that look, the sharp, piercing gaze she often used on me, the one I usually tried my best to avoid. You know exactly what you're doing to me, don't you? I muttered. Elena gave a soft laugh. And how do you think I should explain myself? She moved closer, her gentle scent enveloping me. There was no room to retreat. Her fragrance was something I knew by heart. I had praised it once, and she hadn't changed it for 6 years. Her cold hands pulled my face down to hers. I hoped you would love me, but you seemed to be hoping I'd betray you. A massive wave of information flooded my brain, leaving me feeling like a student whose mind had gone sluggish after a grueling final exam. Elena patted my cheek lightly. What? I stammered. She sat down, her face filled with an eager curiosity. Don't you guys like that trope? The one where the more you can't have the love, the more you want it. A romance where the love comes before the marriage? What is that? I was genuinely reeling. Elena, you really shouldn't read romance novels for more than 180 minutes a day. I managed to choke out. Elena paused for a moment, thinking, before she continued. Back in university, I suddenly started to hear your inner thoughts. She pressed a finger to her lips, a playful glint in her eyes. There are some things I'd rather not say out loud, hee. My brain felt like it was spinning in circles. I felt like an 80-year-old man standing in the middle of a 38-degree heatwave, like I'd spent all morning plowing a field only to realize I'd been working on the neighbor's farm. Trembling, I reached out and took her hand. Did you know that I can sink 15 baskets in a row? Elena nodded. And 5 3-pointers too. Of course, she added, lowering her head with a soft laugh. Her voice dropped to a whisper. If only I could have heard your voice a little sooner, perhaps everything would have been even more perfect. Elena and I talked all through the night. By the early hours of the morning, my jaw actually ached from speaking so much. I practically dragged her to pay her respects at the family altar. Marcus is just an old friend, she explained. I thought since he studied in Paris, he might know some interesting spots. She paused for a beat. She turned her phone screen toward me. On the Weibo homepage, her profile was now linked to mine. There was a photo of us from our university days, a grainy, beautiful shot of us kissing under a streetlight. Husband, you don't look like anyone else, Elena said, looking me straight in the eye. Then she added, because I love you. The comment section exploded instantly. And right on cue, Marcus's name flashed on the incoming call screen. I flopped onto the bed, humming a popular tune while picking up the phone on Elena's behalf. Crossing my legs, I answered with a lazy drawl. Hello? Is there something on your mind, friend Marcus? There was a long silence on the other end before Marcus spoke, his voice sounding raw and parched. Put Elena on the phone. She's exhausted from some vigorous activity. She's sleeping now, I replied smoothly, watching Elena as she focused on peeling a lobster for me. Humph. You're nothing but a replacement, he spat. I took a bite of the snack my wife fed me and replied nonchalantly. Oh? And your point is? Do you want to know why Elena came to see me on the day you two were supposed to be together? She came to ask for my help in finding her high school sweetheart. She already found him. There's no need for you to worry, Elena chimed in, being the first to truly shut him down. She reached over and swiped the screen, ending the call abruptly. Whatever frantic words Marcus was trying to get out on the other side were lost to the wind. Elena nestled her head against my shoulder. I gently massaged her neck. You seem to have quite a collection of replacements, don't you? Was that guy who's 3 centimeters shorter than me also one of your stand-ins? She shook her head firmly. No. I only have you. It's only ever been you. Elena and I spent the next 2 months in a blissful, romantic haze. Eventually, under the constant badgering of our assistants, we finally dragged ourselves back to the office. As we walked through the front doors together, her petite assistant stood there with pursed lips and a dead serious expression. I braced myself. This couldn't be good. Just as I was about to speak, the assistant looked at me, her voice thick with emotion. It's been a long time since I've seen boss Elena smile like that. If she says so, I'll take it, I thought. Elena smiled and playfully poked the young girl's forehead. In the future, remember to take your romance novels outside to read. The girl stuck her tongue out playfully. Oh, that's right, Sister Elena. Marcus has been looking for you lately. She pulled a visitor's log from the reception desk, gave me a quick hand signal, and scurried off. I took the clipboard and began flipping through the pages. For an entire week, Marcus's name appeared every single day. Rain or shine, morning or night, even through thunderstorms, he hadn't missed a day. I let out a long sigh. I had to hand it to him. His shameless persistence was almost impressive. Elena didn't seem to care in the slightest, offering only a vague, uninterested hum before turning back to me. What do you want for lunch today? It was a question worth pondering. But before I could answer, Marcus stepped through the door. His dark, brooding eyes lit up the moment he saw her. His reputation had been plummeting day by day, and life clearly hadn't been kind to him lately. The arrogant, untouchable aura he had when we first met was nowhere to be found. Elena didn't spare him a second glance. I stepped forward, shielding her from his view, and looked down at him. This persistent loser. Is there something you need? Marcus ignored me, his gaze fixed desperately on Elena. Elena, the alumni reunion is next week. If you come, you'll finally realize who it is you've been looking for all these years. I felt a slight tug on my sleeve. Elena's hand rested on my shoulder as she stood on her tiptoes. She paused for a moment before speaking softly to me. Don't worry, Ryan. I've already decided that you are my husband. That's not what I'm worried about. Honestly, I was quite foolish in high school. I always had a gang of little friends following me around. I was like the Monkey King on Mount Huagua. Marcus watched our intimate exchange, his face darkening until it was practically black. I could hear his teeth grinding. Elena, he spat. Do you still have to stand on a chair just to be at eye level with him? I turned around. Elena actually was standing on a chair now, raising her hand to wave at me with a grin. I stayed silent for a few seconds before letting out a laugh. Does Mr. Marcus want to stand on a chair too? You just need to find one as tall as I am. Marcus turned a sickly shade of pale. I was curious to see what color his face would turn next, but Elena was already nudging me to go out for lunch. Maybe next time, loser, I muttered under my breath. I picked Elena up effortlessly and carried her right past Marcus, walking with steady strides out of the office. Once the car, I noticed her ankles were slightly red and swollen from the heels. I pulled a pair of comfortable flats from the trunk and helped her change. Hubby, alumni reunions are mostly just for people to brag about their wealth. If you don't want to go, we don't have to. I leaned down, carefully buckling my wife's seatbelt. Oh, I'm going. I want to see exactly what this old friend of yours looks like. I paused, then suddenly looked up at her. You didn't find him first and then settle for me, did you? Elena shook her head, her expression dead serious. It's not like that. You'll understand when the day comes. Elena had a very reliable assistant, who happened to be her cousin, who had been quietly keeping tabs on Marcus. Between Marcus's bitter attempts to drive a wedge between us and his arrogant claims about what he was allowed to do while I wasn't, his image as a refined, gentle prodigy had completely shattered. To top it off, a trending topic about him, happily playing the homewrecker, had been dominating the hot search for 3 days straight. Elena's acting alongside me hadn't been for nothing, even if it meant she had to fake a limp while wearing high heels. I really had to hand it to Marcus. Despite his reputation being in absolute tatters, he didn't hesitate for a second to attend the alumni reunion. He must have possessed an incredibly resilient heart, or, more likely, a skin thick enough to withstand anything. Elena tucked her arm into mine. She was wearing a solid-colored floor-length gown, her long hair flowing down her shoulders, emphasizing a gentle elegance that was a far cry from her usual corporate persona. Marcus stared at her, unable to tear his eyes away. I stepped in front of Elena to block his view, but before I could say a word, I was pulled away by a group of old classmates. "My man, it's been ages. I never expected to run into you here. Isn't this the legendary Crazy Ryan himself? Back in the game and still looking as sharp as ever." I waved them off. Catching Elena's unmistakable, teasing smirk, I replied calmly, "The legend has been retired for a long time." The friendly mask on Marcus's face shattered instantly. He asked in shock, "You're that guy? The one who used to ride that beat-up bicycle?" How could you summarize high school so crudely? I sighed, pitying his lack of understanding. Suddenly, Elena pointed to herself and looked at me. "Do you remember me? Only the ocean understands the tears of a fish." I stared at Elena for a long time before asking with a tremble in my voice, "You're that girl from high school? Purple hair, tight clothes, always following me around like a shadow." Elena nodded, an implicit, knowing smile spreading across her lips. A wave of unease washed over me. She was the one I had been looking for. The light from my old, white moonlight suddenly illuminated everything, making me realize the truth. I had almost joined a monastery over this girl. One of her friends let out a long sigh. Crazy Ryan and Elena, like a fork and a spoon. "I always knew you two were a match made in heaven." "Ryan, do you remember what you said right before you transferred schools?" Another friend piped up. I grabbed a piece of food, intending to stuff it in his mouth to shut him up, but Elena burst out laughing and beat me to it. Back then, he made a grand declaration. He said, "Becoming a monk is a lifelong commitment, right?" The table erupted in laughter. Marcus watched us, but his complexion shifted through every shade of the rainbow until he finally threw up his hands and stormed out. The reunion lasted until late into the night, a continuous stream of old secrets being unearthed. Elena and I shared a look amidst the noisy chaos. Tonight, her smile was exceptionally radiant. I figured Marcus wouldn't let things go easily, but I never expected him to be quite so twisted. He was the first person to ever stalk me in the dead of night. He truly lived up to the title Loser Marcus. Like a buzzing mosquito that refuses to be swatted, his persistence had become utterly maddening. I woke up in a dark, cavernous space, the metallic scent of blood lingering in the heavy air. I looked over at Marcus. We were both suspended precariously over a vat of chemical waste. He was a piece of work, a man whose malice had finally caught up with him. By the time Elena arrived, I was mid-yawn, forced to listen to Marcus's pathetic monologue about his tragic, unrequited love. He rambled about his secret devotion and admitted to his shoddy Photoshop skills, confessing he'd faked those intimate photos to drive us apart. His eyes were bloodshot, and his designer suit was so rumpled it was painful to look at. I couldn't stand the sight of his tear-streaked face, so I shifted my gaze to Elena. She had rushed here in a panic. She clearly hadn't expected Marcus to resort to this cliched, choose one to save villain act. Her expression shifted rapidly through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Marcus's voice was hoarse, a dry rasp as he screamed, "Elena, have you never cared for me, not even a little? When we were kids, you loved candy, and I always kept some in my pocket just waiting for you. I remembered every dish you liked. I kept everything you ever gave me. So why? Why do you love a punk like him?" A gust of wind made me sway back and forth. I found myself thinking, hey, I'm hardly a punk anymore. Elena remained silent, her calm eyes fixed on Marcus. I wasn't worried about her having a change of heart. I refused to be the stepping stone for their reconciliation. She had come straight from a gala, her evening gown offering no protection against the chill. She bit her lip and replied softly, "You said it yourself, Marcus, that was before. In middle school, I was a chubby girl," she continued, her voice hardening. "You told me I embarrassed you. You told me to stay away. When I was bullied and came to you for help, all you said was, 'It takes two hands to clap.' I looked at Elena's cold, resolute face, and my heart ached as if pierced by a needle. She let out a short, mocking laugh. Later, I followed Ryan and learned how to be a rebel. When people saw me, they called me boss. What did you think I was? Some naive, brainless heroine from a tragic romance, waiting for a heartless man like you to return. Marcus looked like a punctured balloon. He mumbled a few apologies before suddenly losing his mind. In a fit of psychotic rage, he lurched toward me, intent on taking me down with him. The rough rope seared into my wrists as I struggled to maintain my grip. Marcus had truly left himself no way out. He tumbled into the vat of waste, the liquid splashing violently and searing my skin where it landed. The blare of police sirens tore through the darkness. Panic-stricken, Elena lunged toward us just as the terrifying sensation of weightlessness took hold. When I opened my eyes again, the world had shifted. The pungent, sharp scent of disinfectant in the hospital made my head throb. My consciousness was still a blurred haze, but my body moved on instinct, my hand reaching out to grip Elena's tightly. "Elena, let's get married again." Her eyes were bloodshot and brimming with tears. Almost reflexively, she nodded her head in frantic agreement. I had originally intended to wait for the dust to settle before arranging a proper ceremony, but seeing her weep so heartbrokenly that day, I truly couldn't hold back any longer. Marcus was charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, and a litany of other offenses, including attempted wedding interference and coercion. The weight of his crimes was laid bare before the court. The legal proceedings dragged on for several months. When I saw him again at the final hearing, he was a shadow of his former self, nothing but skin and bones. His back was hunched, his eyes sunken deep into his skull, and he couldn't stop coughing. Every trace of his former arrogance had vanished. Marcus accepted the preliminary verdict without appeal. As the sentence was handed down, he begged for one last meeting with Elena. I refused him flatly. The final spark of light in his eyes flickered and died. A soul and body as decayed as his no longer deserved to stand in the light. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I failed to protect her." Elena didn't need a loser like him anymore. She had me, and that was enough. I watched the prison transport vehicle disappear into the distance, then turned and headed straight for the jewelry store. Elena was there, her smile as radiant as a flower in full bloom. She held up the pair of rings she had spent the entire morning selecting. "What do you think?" Two nearly identical diamond bands shimmered brilliantly in her palm. I grinned, pulling her close. "My wife truly has impeccable taste." Elena wrapped her arms around my neck, whispering with a tender, intimate warmth, "Marrying you was a plan I set in motion a long, long time ago." My heart skipped a beat. I leaned down, pressing my lips to hers in a lingering kiss. "And marrying you is exactly where my heart was always meant to lead me."